Welcome to episode 187 of School Librarians United. I'm your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian with now 15 years of experience, I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. Friends, today's episode was recorded in advance of a much-needed family vacation, so shout-outs and listener messages will be shared in next week's episode. I would be remiss if I did not mention that I am able to post weekly episodes because of all the generous and incredibly talented school librarians who provide us with fantastic content each week. If you are interested or you know someone who you think would be a great guest on the show, please check out our FAQs included in all our show notes. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook. On Twitter, my handle is @LMS_United, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now a word from our official sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I am so excited to be working with them. Friends, I am grateful Brian Gorman from Capstone is with us today. Brian, thank you for joining with us, and I'm hoping you're going to help us out with Capstone Connect.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy, for having me again. I'm excited to tell you a little bit about Capstone Connect. Capstone Connect is a platform where I could search via state standard across the 5 subject areas on a given thing I'm looking for. What this sort of search encompasses is it allows you to access all 2,800 PebbleGo and PebbleGo Next articles, so covers all K-5. Also allows you to access 900 instructional materials. So these are sort of grab-and-go lessons that you could do right now. And additionally, on top of that, it also includes 3,500 ebooks. So I'm able to access all these materials, and what it will do is I grab a given standard, whatever it may be, and I could go in and say, okay, these are the articles, the instructional materials, and the ebooks that have to do with said standard. I could also filter those by Lexile, ATOS level to make sure that I could differentiate and find something for my students' needs and sort of throw them in there and give them a lesson that's appropriate for them.
Well, I'm very grateful because I know teachers and school librarians are always looking to lessen each other's workload. I think that we are more likely as school librarians to win over our teachers when we can hand them resources which are not only we can customize to our individual students' needs, but also do not in the larger picture generate more work for our teachers. And so I think that when you have an opportunity to promote a resource like this, that is one which we can feel good about because we're familiar with PebbleGo, and it gives us a really good opportunity to share with teachers a resource we know they can use.
1,000%. And what I like to say is this platform allows teachers to be teachers, right? Instead of just spewing content, they're allowed to put their creativity and their sort of twist on whatever lesson it may be. So they have all the content set and ready for them. Now they could go ahead and make it fun and engaging for their students outside of just the content that they're teaching.
Brian Gorman, I'm so grateful that you came and helped us out today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Amy.
I am so grateful Capstone has generously offered listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for our episode, Budgeting, and my conversation with Angela Wojtecki. Wojtecki, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Amy, for having me. I'm so excited to be back and speak with you.
Friends, Angela, her first episode was under the most unusual of circumstances. Episode 67 was posted on March 30th of 2020, which meant you and I recorded in the immediate days following that Friday the 13th shutdown. For most of us in the Midwest, Friday the 13th was truly an unlucky and memorable day because we didn't go back to school that year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had a 3-month-old baby girl. So, yeah. And I had just gotten back to work. I was just ending my maternity leave. And so I think I had a week back in the classroom and back in the libraries and working again. And then COVID shut me back down again. And I was back to being kind of the stay-at-home mom, but I was kind of thrown into doing online learning, virtual learning. I had teachers emailing and texting me at all hours of the day and night, needing emergency assistance with their Google Meets and all of that good stuff. So it was crazy.
Yeah, because I know at that time it was also a little hard to have perfect strangers working, as like home care for your child. I know we were trying to schedule home health care for my mother who has Alzheimer's. And with a pandemic, you're like, I can't have strangers in my house. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, no one came over for a long, it was crazy. It was nuts.
Yeah, it was a different experience for so many of us, but memorable. For listeners who are just meeting you for the first time, would you please describe where in the country do you work? Tell us about your library program and what kinds of, I know you are in a very different category than most of my listeners. So give us an idea just how different your job is.
Sure. So I am the district librarian at a public school district. It's called Nordonia Hill City Schools. It's a suburban district. It's in Northeast Ohio. We're kind of smack dab in the middle between Akron and Cleveland. I am the district librarian. So I oversee we have 6 schools in our district, and I am in charge of basically managing them all. I do have aides in all of my buildings. Some are part-time, some are full-time. Luckily, our libraries are open most of the school day, which is nice. I would love to see full-time aides, but I'm not quite there yet, but you know how that goes. I have about 4,000 students in our district. It is a flex schedule that I work under, and I'm based out of the high school. So my office is at the high school. I do most of my collaboration with teachers at the high school, but I do travel to other schools periodically as needed. This is my 10th year, so this is very exciting. I'm in the double digits now in my school district. And over the years, I've added more hats to my collection, I like to say. So I'm also the tech integrationist for the district, mainly doing professional development for teachers. I plan an in-service day for the teachers that's all around professional development topics. And then I also do an optional professional development. We call it Knights of the Tech Table because we're the Knights, it's our mascot. So we do monthly little challenges and tech tips and stuff like that. So I help with that. And I run a monthly book club at my high school, which is cool. We do very flexible. The kids just basically come and we talk about books. We kind of threw out the let's all read the same book because they don't have time. So that's kind of where that goes. I also help integrate, we use 7 Mindsets, which is a social emotional learning program. And I'm helping integrate that at our high school. This is new to us this year. I also help with a student. We run a community closet out of our library. So we take donated clothes that are in style, quote unquote, for our teenagers. And we take donations and we run a community closet. So if students need clothing for any reason, we run that out. That was a student idea that she is now graduated, but we've continued that. I also am the National Honor Society co-advisor, and professionally on the library level, I am currently on the AASL Best Digital Tools for Teaching and Learning Committee. This is my second term. So I've done it, and now I'm back with the next round, which is exciting. OELMA is the Ohio Educational Library Media Association. So I want to give a shout out to all of our Ohio librarians who are I know huge fans of yours, Amy. I'm a former president. I currently run the website, which is also a new challenge for me because I have no web design experience whatsoever. But I just decided to take it and give it a try because, I can do a Google site. So so that's kind of me, and lots and lots of hats.
Wow. I remind myself the last time I talked to you, you had an infant, a newborn, and you've managed to take on a great many different responsibilities since you last talked. Clearly, just finding ways to make all of this work. That's incredible. Friends, budgeting is something of an Achilles heel. I have muddled my way through. I'm going to be very honest. When I do budgeting, it's not pretty. And I'm glad that I don't have somebody overseeing my math, because while I've never overspent a budget, it's not a process I enjoy. So I think it's so easy to dwell on the things that we revel in and the things that we really find joy in. Budgeting's not one of them. But I happen to know that many listeners would love to know ways to do this better, because most of us probably didn't take business classes in undergrad or in graduate school. So I really do appreciate you being here. When I was in library school, though, I don't remember anything other than maybe spending a hypothetical budget. And realistically, some of us are strapped with something of an almost non-existent budget, or, a budget that was spent before they got there. So can you give me an idea of what should be happening to our incoming group, our pre-service school librarians, when they are wrapping their head around all that this job entails, including budgeting?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a lot. There's a lot of varying differences with different school districts and that type of thing. So it's sometimes hard to kind of talk to pre-service librarians about budgets because they always look so different. But I think the basics are kind of the same. Basically, you have to ask for, you have to basically requisition or ask for money. You have to get approval from the treasurer's office, and then you get a purchase order and you can pay that way. That's kind of the very bare bones basics. But I think also we have a lot of classroom teachers that are going into school library for a master's program or, for their future careers. And it's always funny to me because they are like, once they learn about budgets, their eyes are like, oh my gosh, this is a whole other beast that they have never had to deal with. And it's like, yeah, this is the library world. So this is the part that no one ever really, tells you about or shows you. So my big thing is whenever I have a practicum student, so they're usually in their last semester before they get their MLIS degree and at whatever university they're at. For us, it's a lot of Kent State students because Kent State is one of our big school library programs here in Ohio. But a lot of them, as part of their checklist of things, there's actually a part that says, see the district budget or see the library budget for the district. So that is something that I share with them. And we basically spend, I would say, about 20 to 30 minutes really diving in because I have so many budget accounts. So because I'm ordering for 6 buildings, and then I order also AV, and then I also have, professional development built into that. So it's a large budget. So I make sure to go over all of the different accounts, the processes that we go through, that type of thing. And then I actually give them a copy of my budget so that they can then take it and basically kind of like study it because, it's important to keep track of your own budget and to know what you've spent and what you haven't spent. And we'll get into that later. But I think it's really, really important. And one of the things I was very honest with during my interview for my current job is I told the people on the interview committee, they asked, what's your least favorite part of being a school librarian? And I said, keeping track of my budgets. Because in my previous job, I also was a district librarian and I also had buildings that I had to order for. So And they really like that answer, and they seem to really kind of understand that answer. And I think it was kind of like, oh yeah, that's something you do. And I could see that being, because they handle budgets too. I mean, your building principals and, your admins, they handle budgets like crazy, like we do too. So I definitely would recommend getting a sample budget from school librarians that are in the field, finding out, because everything is kind of so different depending on where you are. And ask questions, reach out to them, ask them if you don't understand something, if it doesn't make sense to you. The budget paperwork is very financial, and it can be a little overwhelming. So ask for assistance and kind of interpreting that. And, and if you get a new treasurer or you get someone new, just be prepared that probably things are going to change and the budget's going to look different, and just maintain that open line of communication. That's the big piece.
You're making me realize that it's entirely possible, and when I speak about my own personal experience, finding out what my budget is has always been building based. It's been based on, loosely, it's been based on per capita. So there's a budget sort of breakdown based on what kind of support goes to the building based on how many students that building supports. Ultimately, it's a principal's call. And so for us, in my personal experience, I've always been informed of my budget through the clerk the clerk or the secretary who supports the administrator says, oh, by the way, here's what you can spend this year. And may I ask for you, are you the one responsible now for distributing that? Because you are a district librarian, so you happen to be in charge of how much goes to each building.
So yeah, so to answer the question as easily as I can. So when I first started the position, the principals ultimately could move money from other principal accounts into my library. When I started the position, our treasurer said, this is getting too crazy, because the numbers were just not per capita, as you mentioned before, per student. And they were taking money from random accounts and taking the library money from other accounts and putting them into other accounts. It was nuts. So the treasurer actually sat down with me and said, I want you to oversee all of the library budget lines. And that's when she handed me the packet, with the stapled packet with all these crazy numbers. And then she said, the principals will sign off on your requisition. So the principals will know what you're ordering, but there will really be a hands off on this budget, so that they're not moving money around without the library knowledge, because there had been some issues in the past with that. The principals can technically, though, purchase out of my budget, but they really don't have any control into, what money's in there, what money's, taken out and moved around, that type of thing. And I appreciate that. I really do. I think that it shows that they respect, my decision making, and this is the role I'm in, and I am in charge of budgets, and I can maintain it. So I think it's really kind of a conversation you have to have, but from a district perspective, it's really interesting if you see different buildings having different account money and it can get really kind of interesting. And I wouldn't recommend the first year having those conversations with administrators and say, I only have this much and this building has. I wouldn't recommend that, but just keep that in the back of your head for the future, and always kind of make them aware that you need that money, and that even a little more money might be helpful.
Well, and I've had recent conversations with librarians who have had sort of mid-year epiphanies, sort of, these programs that they want to initiate that you didn't conceive of in July or in August, but now it's, October and November, and you want to initiate a program for which there is no money. And therein lies the additional step of having to make your plea to your administrator. And they do have magic money. They do have funds for which there is a great deal of flexibility. And it's just about how well you sell this program and how receptive our administrators are. And sometimes timing is everything. And it may be that this is something that comes up during a time we just do not have some of that magic money. But it is, and all you can do is try, right? All you can do is try. When I was in library school, I'm going to guarantee you nobody said, oh, and by the way, some of you may find yourself in libraries with no budget. I mean, how do you prepare our pre-service librarians? How do you wrap your head around the fact that you may be walking into a situation where, for that year at least, there is no money?
This is just kind of a mystery to me. I don't quite understand the thinking behind having a library staff, and then not having the items needed for that space to flourish and to be an environment where it's, the center of your school. So I thought of the analogy when I was thinking through these questions of it's kind of like when you build like a brand new doctor's office, and you have a great doctor and you have a great staff and you have this beautiful space, but you don't have any equipment. You don't have the tables, you don't have the bandages, you don't have you don't have anything. That's kind of this idea. And it just isn't right. It's just not right. And so I feel for those school librarians, because I know every state and, lots of people have encountered that. And it's just mind-boggling to me. But I think people need to know that you don't have a budget. And there's a way to professionally do this. We have a school district here in Ohio, and I will not call them out, but we have a school district here that is one of the best high schools in the country by U.S. News and Reports when they do that annual thing where they announce all the top high schools. They're a top high school. Their elementary school has no budget for the library. And one of our parents lives in that district, and I shared with her that I found this out. I said, I found out that your elementary school where your kids go, they don't have money for books. They rely on their book fair money to pay for their library books every school year. And she's an English teacher, and her jaw about hit the floor. And she said, "What do you mean there's no budget for books?" I said, there's nothing. She's basically, that librarian is running a book fair to pay for books. And she goes, we didn't know. And she's like, I'm on the PTA. We did not know this. So long story short, there's been some conversations with principals and other things. And the last thing she told me before we left for the summer was, we are so working on that. We're so working on it. And it's basically the PTA working with the librarian on kind of ways they can advocate, and get kind of more information out. But I do think there's a way to kind of always be sharing that, this is what we have. In the show notes, I included a document with some pictures that I kind of took from Twitter, but I left the handle so the librarian, we know who that person is. But it's basically a picture of a cart with books, and it says, this is what the $3,000 I get every year buys in library books. And I think the picture says it all, because I think in our mind we think, oh, wow, $3,000, or, oh, wow, I made, the book fair, we made $1,000, we get $1,000 in free books. Well, this is what that really gets us. And that visual representation, I think, is important, because it brings to life, like, this is really how expensive things are. And this is not even 10% of our students, represented right here in this collection. So it's really tough. I also think when you meet with your principals for evaluations, if you don't have a library budget, share with them your goals and how that budget can help meet those goals, especially for the students and what the students are asking for, but you can't afford it. So I definitely always try to kind of professionally share, the needs. And then in the show notes, I put a long list of ideas if you don't have a budget for different funding. So whether it's grants or whether it's PTA, whether it's crowdsourcing and, doing Amazon wish lists, and sharing that out to your community, I think the more people are aware of the need, the more they'll meet that need.
Also, the idea of, I can't think of, and I'm very biased, I can't think of a more trustworthy person than to give money to a librarian, because the librarian is going to be very egalitarian in how we spend it. We aren't going to forget the needs just because, and this is what makes me cringe, is when people say, oh, well, we use our book fair money. I've run 17 book fairs. If that's all you're going to be buying, by the way, that's what your kids just bought. The book fair is based on the profits made by the books that were purchased at the book fair, and they want you to buy more of those books. You're like, yeah, but that's what the kids just bought. I want to give them new, and I want to give them others, and but this tirade is I'm preaching to people who are living this, but I want to make sure that folks realize that whatever you do, whatever, all those machinations, the things that you come up with, all these solutions, you have to run these by your admin. And you can be as enthusiastic as you want. And I'll tell you what, I'm on library Facebook a lot, which is why I know there are plenty of people in this predicament where funding is going to override so many of their other priorities because there isn't any. But appreciate that as enthusiastic as we may be in trying to solve this problem, your administration will determine what you can and what you can't do. And I was floored when I was told that there was one particular approach that I was not going to be able to use. And you're like, wait, but people do this on Facebook all the time, and people, no, and shut it down. And so wherever you are, that's what you have to work with. But until you raise those issues, and that's why, I consider myself very lucky. I've always been able to have a weekly meeting with my admin, short, but, we connect and we're on the same page about what the building needs first and foremost. But I'll tell you what, when it comes to fundraising, there are some, deal breakers, and there are some things that absolutely will not fly past the administration. And your job is to, number one, make sure that you don't burn those bridges. You want to always keep those lines of communication open, and be very, very careful about how your lack of a budget is shared with others, because if your districts are like my districts, everybody knows everybody. You just don't know how they know them, And so when you do talk to your PTO, make sure that you've attended a meeting. You have something that's a proposal that you can, and make sure that you are at all times very acutely aware that whatever happens has got to get past the admin. So that is just speaking from experience.
Yes. No, that's a great point. That's a great point.
Angela, I'm curious, do you recall learning how to budget for the libraries in your district? Mm-hmm. That must have been a very steep learning curve. Forgive me, it sounds daunting.
Yes. So it is very daunting and it's very overwhelming. And I will tell you that the last thing you want to do as a new librarian in a new position is to reach out to your treasurer's office or your principal and say, so where's my money? And how do I spend it? But you have to do it. You have to do it. I would recommend the first couple weeks on the job. I'm not saying like the first day on the job, but the first couple weeks on the job. I would definitely, if you don't have the budget given to you by a secretary or a bookkeeper or your administrator, ask for a meeting, a face-to-face meeting to get that information from whoever is supposed to give that to you. And 9 times out of 10, that person will meet with you and kind of lay down the basics with you. So that's what I would do. And, also have, talk if you have library aides or other librarians in your districts, talk to them about the budget and see how they manage their budget, the base, okay, do you send me wish lists? Like my library aides send me wish lists through Tidal Wave is who we order through Follett. So they'll send me those wish lists and then I'll go through them and kind of that will be part of my collection development process to see, because those are books that the students are asking for. They might be books in a series that we need to add add to, that type of thing. So see kind of how that goes. And then the last thing is, you're going to have some of you might have many budget accounts. You might have a line for ebooks. You might have an account line for supplies. You might have an account line for AV equipment. You might have one for professional development. So you can go to conferences if you're fortunate enough to have that, or be, members of, be a member of your state organization. So all of those you definitely want to know about, and you want to know if any money has been spent for that fiscal year. So if you start mid-year or something like that, you want to have all that information. And for our school, July 1st is when our new fiscal budget begins. So for every district has a different kind of timeline. It's not January 1st. For some it's July 1st. For some it might be a different time. So know when your actual fiscal budget starts. And then usually you also want to know when it's going to be time to set up your budget, because for us it's in May. What I make sure to do in May is I set up a face-to-face meeting with our district treasurer and the assistant treasurer to basically lay out the plan for the next fiscal school year. So our budget starts July 1st. So I make sure that we have money in the accounts. We have the money that we need in the accounts. And then if I need to move any money, for example, if I need to move money from supplies into ebooks, I make sure to go ahead and do that at that time, to kind of make it all face-to-face, no questions asked. This is what I want to do. I also bring a copy of my budget from that school year to the meeting in case there are questions that he may have, that type of thing. And then we have a new treasurer. This is his second year, and he's really great at communicating in terms of if there's a certain project, or if I want to bring an author in or something like that, there's ways that we can work with the money to make that happen. We just have to discuss it, and we just have to kind of look at where we're at financially. So he's been really, really great at that. But having that face-to-face meeting, I think, is so important. And I think when I show him my budget template, which I've attached in the show notes, so I keep track of my budget kind of on my own to make sure that money is, we're both on the same page, because no one's perfect. And there are sometimes mistakes that the treasurer's office can make when processing purchase orders and that type of thing. So I bring that with me, and he's always like, wow, you're so organized. He's like, I wish everybody, made budgets like the library. Because we're just so, we're organized, and we want to keep track of every penny. And so I bring that with me to just kind of show him, here's what we've spent, here's what we need, here's kind of what I'm thinking. And then we make a plan from there. So take the time to do that for sure. And it is a little nerve-wracking, especially if you're new, or especially if you're in a big district, to meet with a treasurer, or to meet with a curriculum director, or whoever is in charge of your budget. That's a little nerve-wracking, but you have to do it, because that's what's best for your library, and that's what's best for your students. So you have to, it's okay if you might be nervous, you might not be sure exactly what you're doing, with conversations and that type of thing, because they speak a whole different language. So just, but you got to do it. You have to do it. You kind of just have to take charge of that and have that conversation. And you're right. The worst thing that anyone can ever say to you is no. I mean, if you don't ask, that you won't know. And the worst thing they can say is no, that this isn't a good time for that, or no, we can't do that. Okay, at least the answer is no.
A couple things you mentioned right off the bat. You mentioned fiscal calendar. That is something which is not the school calendar. And I think that was a really different, that for me, hearing that and learning, a fiscal calendar is not going to start, because we start in September and we end in June. You're talking about May for the next year. And, what that reminds me is that we need to come to school, whatever your start date is, ready with ideas to spend. Like you obviously want to make sure that you're always going to factor in the things that are coming up during the school year, but there are deadlines for us which in no way match up with the school year. And I know, at least in my personal experience, that my spending has to be done by the end of February. All those lists have to be submitted by no later than, I think, the beginning of March, even though we still go into late June. And so it's a very different kind of calendar. Being aware of those spending deadlines is absolutely key. It's so frustrating because I'd love to spend money in the end of the year, but there isn't any. There is no money in May. There is no money in June. When you talk about the kinds of things we have to think about, there are some unfun things that we have to buy. And for me, a lot of that are the books that are lost over the summer. Having to replace things that have been checked out so often, or we need fresh copies. And that's a good thing, but it's not a fun thing because you're like simply replacing things that get enjoyed from year after year after year. And those are the kinds of things we have to remember. That is also part of our budget, is replacing things that are broken, replacing things that were lost, and things that really don't, in my opinion, feel nearly as exciting as putting out those new titles every, and then also about our supplies. By the way, book tape, labels, laminate, depends on what you have to purchase. So all of that's important. It just doesn't necessarily have to be, prioritized by us, but it has to happen. Angela, you oversee libraries in your district. In my experience, even within a district, the individual schools are going to be very distinct in how monies are allocated to the different programs, including the libraries. How does that affect what you do every day?
Mm-hmm. So that's a great question. So I, definitely having a budget that is technically part of that individual school building can raise some challenges because the principals, they see that budget line. And a lot of times they don't quite understand that, that's strictly for the library. We had a principal a couple years ago who was new to the district and just decided to purchase a couple $100 worth of classroom library books out of that budget. And again, because I was keeping track in my own little spreadsheet and my own little document of all of our purchases, when I got the budget report that said, I was, close to zero and I just had like a mini heart attack. And I said, no, I have like a couple $100 left in there. Oh no, that money was spent by the principal. And not knowing that, library books did not include classroom library books. So, again, you have to put on your manager hat, you have to put on your leader hat, and you have that conversation with that administrator and just say, that money was intended for the whole school, for the library, not just, a teacher's classroom or a few teachers' classrooms. And the principal was very gracious about it, very apologetic, and she ended up moving money back into that account and making it right. So, so just be aware that those type of things can happen when you have those type of, budgets where everyone can kind of see what's in those accounts in terms of the administrators. And then the key is that when you're keeping an eye on your budget, you want to make sure that number that's in that budget stays the same or increases. If you see that number decreasing every year, so this year you have, a couple thousand, next year you notice, oh, I don't have that same amount and it's actually less. Have that conversation about, why is that money different? Was there an error? What's going on? That type of thing. A lot of librarians don't catch those minor little things. And then when the time comes to spend money, you're like, oh, I didn't realize I didn't have that money originally in there. That's important. And then also communicating with the principals, with the district administration. So we do quarterly reports for the library that we share out with our principals and superintendent and kind of everyone that needs to know what the library is doing. And so we share that out and we actually document what we've been, purchasing. Whether it's books, ebooks, how many ebooks, how many audiobooks. If we bought, maybe we bought a new poster maker in the library, we talk about that and the services it offers for the district and the teachers. So, definitely share what that money is going towards so that people are in the loop. Because sometimes they just are too busy with what they're doing that they're not really focusing on, oh, I didn't realize that the library got this great new color poster maker. Wow, that's really cool. Just kind of know that, it's okay to kind of communicate, share information, and also keep an eye on those budgets.
That's a really great piece of advice. I've always gotten the sense that the biggest cheerleader for my program is me. And that's not a bad thing. But also I rapidly sort of gained this appreciation meeting with my admin that they have many priorities. The library, yes, the Learning Commons, what happens in my space, but therein lies a great deal of trust. I'm going to trust you to run this space and keep in touch with me so we can make sure we're always on the same page. But it is very obvious to me when we're talking about money that I get very, very passionate about how vitally important it is to support the library. And it's hard for me to also recognize that there are other spending priorities in the building, because in my opinion, the really big thing is supporting the space that I work in. But I want to mention, because while you and I living in the Midwest may not be benefiting from the influx of new families, I know in my communities, we are shrinking. I live in what is called the Rust Belt, and our communities are losing students on the daily to pretty much Georgia and Texas. Many of our families are moving. And what I am aware of is when I see librarians who are talking about how many more students they have this year than they had the year before, Therefore, the budget should also be incrementally increasing with that influx of new students. If your student population in your building is growing, your budget should grow. And I know what my student enrollment is because I can see from our student management, we have a learning management system, and I can see the back end, and I can see how many students are enrolled in my school on any given day. But if that number keeps on going up, then my budget should be going up.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a conversation that, needs to be had, especially when you're meeting with the treasurer or you're setting that budget for the next fiscal year, is to definitely share that need of, we've got a lot more students in the library and I can't keep up with the collection. I need some assistance and ask for help, ask for some assistance for that.
Well, and that was the other point, is that when you talk about you have media techs or library techs who are supervising all of these spaces. If the population of the building gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the demands on the space are bigger and bigger. And you may be asking for another FTE. You may be asking for, a full-time rather than a part-time, or bringing in a second person, because all of a sudden the demands of the building are there, and you have a reason to ask. How do you prioritize your budget? The allocating of spending, when we take a look at what our students want, what our teachers need, and supporting those important building initiatives, because invariably our buildings are going to have things that require us to have supportive materials in our collections and our digital spaces as well.
Mm-hmm. So I really just try to focus on the current needs of each school library and what the student needs are as well. And student requests are always going to come in, and they're always important, but you definitely want to do your research on their requests and make those decisions based on those needs and those priorities. So I know a lot of school districts are buying more and more manga collections and that type of thing. But but then you have some curriculum needs. So it's kind of like, okay, so how do I balance that? So it is definitely, something to reflect on, and maybe you just buy the first 5 novels of that manga, and then the rest goes towards more curriculum needs, at that time. And then you can buy more mangas, later on if you have remaining funds. So it's just kind of juggling those type of things. A lot of school librarians have been doing weeding through COVID, just because maybe for the first time ever, they had a nice chunk of time to actually do it, or maybe they realized they really needed to spend some time to weed that. So that was a priority. So if you do lots of weeding, focus on ordering newer books that that you may have weeded. So for example, we weeded a bunch of, at one of our elementaries, a bunch of animal books and space books and medical health type of books, just because they were outdated mostly. And so what we did is as we were weeding, we were making kind of a running list of those topics, and then how many books we were approximately weeding in those topics. And then we're trying to supplement that now. So we're trying to add some newer books that, on space and animals and that type of thing that can kind of, beef up that collection a little bit more since we got rid of them. So it's kind of that bringing in as you're cleaning out. If you have certain projects, like we had a STEM project in one of our buildings, our grades 5 and 6 school, they were doing a big STEM project, and the library really had little materials to help supplement those. So what we did is we kind of allocated a certain percent of the budget that school year just to STEM books that would help. I met with my aides to make sure that those books were definitely going to be popular. For example, like duct tape craft books, or, those type of books are popular. Different coding how-to books were also really in demand. So, making that list from that. So that became one year's project, is just we allocated maybe 30% of our book budget on those STEM books. Grant funding, that type of thing. If there's a specific project you have in mind, consider a grant, because those projects are perfect for grants. So we have an educational school foundation in our district that gives out twice a year grant funding for different projects. So if you, for example, want to do a STEM book project and have more, resources, if you want to do a type of makerspace activity in the library, but you don't have a budget for that, that's where those grants come in. So that's really important. And then every year your budget's going to look different. So one year you might have a ton of new ebooks and audiobooks added to your collection, and not as many paper format books. But in the case of COVID, that was the need. The kids needed to be able to read on their Chromebooks or on their devices at home. So, every year it's different. And just think of the priorities, think of where you are right now in terms of your collection, do those audits, do those type of reports that are available. For example, in Follett, they do collection analysis reports that can really see where your weaknesses in your collections are and kind of build it from there. And then you have that documentation to back up the need if there's questions on why are you buying so many nonfiction books this year? Well, here's why. And then also, I allocated some money last school year. I really wanted a new poster maker because our old poster maker was just not doing what we needed it to do. So I moved some money around to purchase that. And so I took some money out of some supply budget. I took some money out of professional development because I wasn't going to conferences. And I just moved that money around, because if you don't spend that money, you're going to lose it.
I absolutely know that it's a use it or lose it situation. And we had, I can say this because it's a district I no longer work in, but there was, during the pandemic, we had some vacancies, and because we were virtual, we didn't hire anybody for those positions. So those of us who were still there sort of occupied those other libraries in sort of a custodial arrangement. I take these and you take those. And we had to spend those budgets even though we didn't work in those libraries, because if we didn't spend it, it's not like we could save that budget for the person who was going to take the space next year. That money was going to be gone. And so it's a very different experience spending money when that library, for me at least, hadn't been one that I had worked in for years. But it's also a fun opportunity because you realize, I'm going to do this now. We're going to spend this money now. These books are going to be here. And you know what? I have to do this, because if you don't, it's not like you can recoup that and say, oh, you have twice as much of budget next year. No. It never works that way. I'm really curious because you mentioned the poster printer. Are there some resources which your library department sort of uses collectively as a shared resource? I'm thinking, I know in my building, I'd love to have a poster printer. I don't have one, but it would make sense as a district to purchase one, house it, somewhere, and then find a way to allocate those sort of credits to use them per building, so that even if one building couldn't afford to support a poster printer, if you shared that, if you had it sort of localized in one school and then gave buildings a certain amount of poster credits that they could, use, that might be a cost saving measure right there, rather than doing it out of house.
Correct. Yes. And so our library we have kind of a space that is kind of that district space where we do district laminating. Not all of our buildings have a laminator, so they send it to us to get laminated. And there is a part-time library aide that's part of her job is to do that. And we also have the poster maker is a district use poster maker, and we set up a Google form, and the teachers and anyone who needs a poster can order. The caveat is if you're in the library, the posters are free because it's coming out of our budget. If you are a teacher and you want to purchase a poster or you want to have a poster made, we do have a fee, and it comes out of of a budget. So, for example, if the English teacher at the middle school wants a poster made, she can fill out the Google form, send us, exactly what she wants the poster to be made. We are not creators, we're just printers. And then from there, she gives us a budget line, and we charge that budget line for that poster. So then that money ends up going, technically in the general fund. But again, it keeps that money in there so that if there's questions, I can say, well, we've made this, we've had this many posters made and this much money has been kind of going back and forth. So you have that data to kind of advocate for that fund. But yeah, so it's worked really nicely. Again, we have about 4,000 students in our district, so it's a nice mid-sized district, so we can handle those type of jobs. And it fills a need. And then not every building needs to spend, $5,000 for a high quality poster maker.
Well, and by that same token, presumably the fee that you're charging is really in order to recoup whatever you're going to then spend on the new cartridges, and maintenance. It has nothing to do with labor. This isn't about, we need to pay the person who's in charge of this. We have to pay for things like the ink cartridges. And I can't imagine what ink cartridges on a poster maker cost.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but they do last. They do last.
You've done the math.
Yeah, they do last, and the paper is very expensive. If you want the high quality thick paper, that is expensive for the poster maker as well. But yeah, we do. It's a minimal cost. We don't make a profit or anything. Not allowed to do that.
Okay, no. But it makes sense. If I'm correct in understanding, a budget factor is not just what we are spending during the school year, but also what income we might have. Libraries collect fines for lost or ruined books. Do your schools have petty cash? What has been your experience when it comes to petty cash? I have experienced it all.
And I have experienced no petty cash. So it's kind of funny. So every library I've worked in, every district, we don't allow petty cash at all. When you get money from a student for a lost book, that must be deposited to the bookkeeper by the end of that school day. That money cannot stay in the library. So, and that's just, I think, for liability purposes, and that's just kind of the way that our districts run. But we don't have overdue fees. We just have lost book fees. So if they lose the book or damage the book, then there's a fee for that. And once that money is turned into us, we then deposit it into the general fund. So it does not go back into the library, unfortunately. So what we have to do is actually keep track of books that are being paid for, and then allocate, for the next year's budget, kind of that money. So we've kind of worked a way to make that happen, but it's definitely a data project. So you got to keep track of all that stuff, because, if you collect $500 in overdue or in lost books, you need to make sure that you're purchasing those books, and that school year you won't have the money. So it's kind of a negative there. But again, that's just, those are the rules that you have to follow, depending on the district that you're in. For COVID, we lost a ton of books, as I know a lot of people did. A lot of libraries lost a lot of books. And so we actually sent a report of all the books that we lost and the total amount as a district to our treasurer's office, and they allocated some extra money for us to recoup those items, because that was a special circumstance, of course. So that was something we did to kind of help out a little bit and not feel so like, oh no, we lost all these books and we don't know what's going to happen. So that's kind of how that goes. And yeah, and our treasurer is very adamant that money has to go back into the general fund. It's which is a little disheartening. You got to follow the rules.
Okay, so in my experience, petty cash has taken all sorts of different iterations. I worked in a district for many years where I just had a pencil bag, like a little pencil zip pencil case, and I kept cash in there, and it was in a locked file cabinet. But kids paid me, and I never charged overdues, but I'm talking when a kid has to bring a destroyed book in a Ziploc bag because their puppy went to town on it, rather than going to the main office and paying that fine, they're coming to me, and they'll bring a 20 for a Junie B. Jones paperback that's $3.99, and I now have to have change. And so I did that. I've worked in one building where that was still the way we worked with like lost and destroyed books, but the Ziploc bag had to be downstairs in the safe. I've done that before. I've done some situations where I worked in a building, and every building's different. I could go to Sam's Club, buy 10 books because they had the new Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and they always have the hardcovers, and I would buy 10 books. I didn't have to ask permission, and I'd just come down with my receipt from Sam's Club, and I'd say, hey, I went to Sam's Club. They're like, okay, go get your money. And that was easy. And I've had some districts where, like you, that money is not mine. I cannot spend it, even if I wanted to spend it on books. And again, this is a conversation you need to work out with your clerk, with your district, and find out, because every district does something different when it comes to handling things like, fines. And again, never an overdue fine, but if a book is destroyed, no one can read it anymore. I have worked in districts where we do have replacement fees, and I've worked in districts where we don't have replacement fees. It's just, it's the cost of doing business, Amy. Buy another book. I would love if you could, because you've worked with a lot of different people in the job that you do. Can you sort of talk about some of the mistakes that librarians make when it comes to money, because we don't have MBAs, and we're used to spending money for household items, but this is a different type of the restrictions on what we can and can't do. And, I think it's a very different, we sit there and go, hey, I buy stuff for my house all the time. I know how to buy stuff for a library. No, we don't. But what are some mistakes you've seen?
The budget world, the finance world is so different from the library world. And that's, like I said, it's a huge learning curve. And I wanted to add in the show notes, I have put a financial term glossary for those that need that. Actually, I cannot give credit to this. I have to give credit to my bookkeeper, Mrs. Amy Strauss at the high school. She actually put this together, and it's all, so if a treasurer says, or if a, someone from the treasurer's office says, a budget unit, you know what that is. Or if they say unencumbered or encumbered, you know what that is. So it's a really helpful document. It's in the show notes for you. And that will help, especially the beginners or those of you still in library school, kind of get an idea of the language of, those business people. But some other mistakes or things that I've actually done myself is I definitely recommend to spend the money. Don't think that by kind of, I'm going to leave some money in there. No, nobody cares. That money is allocated for spending. So you spend it, and don't feel bad about spending it. Sometimes we are like, I'm just not quite sure, just spend it. Also, know that you can move money around. So if you've got an ebook line, if you've got a supply line, you can move money around freely. You usually just have to do a simple email to your bookkeeper or whoever is in charge of entering your orders into their system. For some librarians, that's them, which is a whole other beast in itself. Luckily, I don't have to do that. I have a fabulous bookkeeper that does most of my ordering, and I spoil her with lots of chocolates and lots of helpful tech things. If she needs help with anything Google, I'm like, I will help you, because I want to make her life easier, because she makes my life easier. So just know you can move that money around. You could send an email out and just request that that money get deposited somewhere else, and they will do that for you. Don't wait until the end of the year to order all at once. So I have never done this because I'm a spender. I like to spend money, but I know some people like to wait until the very last month of school or month of when they can actually order, and they want to order all at once in one big bulk order. Keep new items coming in. This is really, really important. And I think the students want to see new items. I think it kind of refreshes your collection. It refreshes your library. It gets your kids excited about the library and the new books coming in. So kind of, sporadically, I order usually 2 to 3 times a school year for new items. And then I keep a schedule on actual a calendar of when I'm going to order. So I keep myself kind of accountable for that. Because as you know, time gets away, and then you're like, oh, I should have done that book order. Well, keep it on the calendar and make sure, okay, I'm going to order, for example, my magazines in October. I'm going to order my supplies in November. I'm going to order books in February, and then know the deadline for ordering. You mentioned this earlier, Amy, but that's just really, really important. You want to make sure you know the exact deadline for when the budgets close so that you can spend the money. So if you're banking, oh, I can't wait to spend, there's this, a really great book coming out May 15th. Well, you're probably not going to be able to order it if all of your spending is in April. So just keep that in mind and kind of think about that. And then if you are new to the job, ask for a copy of the last 3 years of library budgets. Let them know that they're for your library records because you don't have them. This way you can see what the budgets were before you. And if there's any glaring issues or glaring miscalculations, then you can set up a meeting with your treasurer or your principal and kind of go over that. There is a tendency to cut budgets when there's a new person that's entered into the picture. And sadly, I've seen this personally. I know friends in the library world that have had this happen. And if you don't know what you had before, then you don't know. But if you are being fiscally responsible and you're saying, I want to make sure I have everything, before I was here, so that if there's questions and then you see that, wow, they had a lot more money than I have, then you can have a conversation about that and say, what's going on with that? And just be transparent that you want to know, you're just interested why there's less funding for your library and for your students. So again, meet with the treasurer, do ask questions. Take time to meet with them annually because things change and procedures change, and you want to make sure you're in the loop with that. And then just show how interested you are in being a good steward of school funds. That goes a long way. And I think sometimes people are just overwhelmed and they're just not, budgets are like the last thing you want to deal with in your job sometimes, but it's so important to have that financial department's, kind of support and know who you are and know that you're keeping track of your money and know that you know what you're spending and know that, they trust you then with that. Also ask about procedures such as ordering through, for example, Amazon is a whole separate procedure if we want to order through Amazon. And I'm so glad we can order through Amazon now, but it's a whole other procedure. So things like that, ask questions about, and have some time set aside to actually ask those questions. Don't try to rush through it because chances are, you might miss a step or you might miss a critical piece that you need to know. And then don't always trust those budget reports that get put in your mailbox in the main office. People make mistakes, and sometimes purchase orders for whatever reason get entered in differently, or money gets spent differently, as we mentioned before. So keep track of your own purchases. I made a template that you can actually make a copy of in a Google Doc that spells everything out, and it's what I use. It's basically the name of the budget number order, the name of the budget, like ebooks or books or supplies, and then how much money you're starting that school year with. So for example, $800 in supplies. And then if you make a purchase, you add to that document. And that's kind of what you use for your budget. And that way there's no questions on what you're spending, and you know what's been spent.
Well, and you bring up so many important points. Friends, it is so fun to learn new things. And my mind is being blown by this conversation because I've been this will be my 16th year being a librarian. I've had a budget every year, and all the things that Angela just mentioned, it's the first time I'm hearing them. It really would have been much better if you and I had this conversation at the beginning of my career. I'm sorry. So for those of you brand new sitting down to your brand new library, you already know more than I do. I do want to mention a couple things that I sort of stumble over. And by the way, your show notes are fantastic. So friends, this is something that comes up sometimes when people ask me, oh, I'd like to be a guest on your show. What does it take? Well, I am going to ask that you have things that our listeners can use. I'm going to ask that there are some resources that you are welcome to share and pass along, because we're always better together. And I'll tell you, Angela's notes are fantastic because, again, this isn't something I've done a great deal of homework on. I've sort of done the job I have at the given time, but it's, again, nothing I'm proud of. I will say something I stumble over are placing the orders, and then you have back-ordered copies. And I am terrible about this, but just because you put it on your list doesn't get you off the hook, especially if those books come back ordered. And we experienced that a lot this past year because of the supply chain and all the ship containers floating around the Pacific, and my books took forever to get here. But what is your advice when it comes to dealing with book orders for which there's a great deal of back order that hasn't come in? I know one of my friends says, well, always overspend your budget by about $200 or $300 and then have a do not exceed on your list. But again, there are books that I ordered last fall that never came in. I should be putting those on this year's purchase order, right?
Yes. So whenever, it depends on how you want to set it up, but whenever you have a book order, and like for me, I get it in 2 shipments. I get the first shipment of what they have, and then the second shipment is basically the back ordered items. Well, that seems to be taking forever and a day. So you can actually just cancel that back order item with the vendor. So you can contact them and say, okay, just, cancel, don't ship any more items. And then you can pay that purchase order for whatever that total is. And then, what's nice is that usually there's a list of the back ordered items that they send you, either electronically or it's in your account online. And what you can then do is, add those items to the next wish list for the next item. So that's usually what I've been doing this school year. Typically, it's not an issue. Usually, back-ordered items come within, a month or 2 or something. But I think this year, and I anticipate this coming school year too, unfortunately. It seems like there's a label or paper shortage or something else going on. So who knows? But so my books might come unprocessed, which I'm preparing myself for that, if that happens to be the case. But yeah, so, the back ordered items at this point, I just cancel out because I'm like, I'm not waiting and I need to close out my purchase orders. So I'm just going to cancel out and add them to the next order. And, and you will have then some unencumbered funds. You'll have some extra money in that account, which, at this point it's a loss because the money's, is probably going to be gone. But I mean, that's the nature of the beast. And our treasurer's office has been very understanding with the supply chain issues. And we've actually kept purchase orders open through when I get back in August with the hopes that they miraculously appear. Because they understand this isn't just happening in the library world. It's happening everywhere.
Angela, I'm learning so much. I'm so grateful you came today. What advice would you give? You've been giving us advice this whole time, but send us, bring it all home. And what would you say to a bunch of people who are like, please teach me how to do this better?
Okay, so I have some tips and tricks for sure, as and these have all come from personal experience. So the first one is collaborate ideas with the people that have the money. So collaborate ideas with your curriculum department, with any type of, committee that you might have in your district that has funds, your special education department. They usually are well funded, and have a conversation with them about some initiatives or some ideas you have. And the worst they can say is, that's a great idea, but no, we don't have funds for that. That's the worst they can say. And at least you're putting it out there. And also, share with them that the students are, we need to meet the needs of the students. We have this, I'd say the last 2 or 3 years, we've had a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, which is a community committee that works with a lot of our school district leaders. And every week they have what they call a diversity week, and there's a different theme every year. And every classroom, every teacher in the district dedicates, 30 to 40 minutes a day on a specific diversity project. And then in the library, we supplement with having the literature. We have the books, we have the things that tie into it, and we do displays and that type of thing to kind of help with that. And there's no extra money for that. So luckily we have, through that committee, they have helped us fund those materials. So kind of asking, for those, this is a great idea, can you allocate some funds so we can add some more of the books? Keep in mind that personnel should never be part of your budget. So if you see that you're paying someone's salary out of your budget, that has nothing to do with you. So that is a big red flag there. If you do have a budget cut, try to let others know what this means for the students professionally, of course, and reach out for assistance, apply for grants, meet with the treasurer. You have to put in some work to really show that this is a loss. This is a major loss for your district, for your school, for your students, for your families. And, there's lots of different alternative funding ideas out there, as we mentioned before, but, you should have some type of budget. To run a successful library, you really, really do. And just because they cut your budget 1 year does not mean it will be slashed forever. So don't have, a negative attitude. Try to stay positive about it, because 1 year, you might take a hit, but it can get better, and you don't want to, have that negativity kind of be known. Also, have a wish list of things that you want at a moment's notice, because sometimes there's a rare instance where principals will come to you and they'll give you a one-time bonus funding. So they'll come in your library. It will be, of course, in the middle of a class, and they'll say, "Hey, Angela, I have great news. I have $3,000 that I can spend on things for the library. What do you want?" And you're going to stand there and you're going to say, "Oh, so much." But
can I just say, I can give her a shout out because I don't work there anymore. Connie was my favorite person in a building I used to work in, and I loved her to death because every once in a while, and she'd say, "Hey, Amy, we have some," and this building secretary, "Amy, we had about $750 left over from X, and I was told that, that you could spend it on the library. How soon can you get me a list?" I had 3 flights up, ran 3 flights up to my office. I printed out a list. I think I had to add about 4 books to that list, but I already had a list going. That was going to be my next book order. And I came back down. I put it in her hands. I know I could have just emailed it, whatever. And she's like, "Wait, really?" I'm like, "Yep." So Connie's my best friend from that school. And because I know that at some point somebody said to the administrator, "We didn't spend all the money for the ice cream social. We didn't spend all the money that we needed for, the movie night. What do we do with this?" And the idea is, what? I can think of a very easy way to spend that money in a way that's going to be used judiciously and with everybody in mind. And that's the school librarian. Sorry, go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt, but I do have to give my shout out to my favorite person, Connie, because I loved it to death. She made every day better, but I also say it made it hard because I don't work there anymore. And when you realize what a good thing you've got, you're like, oh, I just wish I could bring you to my new school.
I know. I totally understand. You have those people who you just support all the work you do, and those people are gold. They're gold. So have that wish list, have the items ready, have different varied amounts, have things up to chairs and rugs and those fun things, all the way down to specific book items or series of books that you want to purchase, that type of thing, and have that ready to go, because that money can be fleeting. So, for example, they might say we have $3,000, but I also asked the science department if what they needed. So you want to have that ready to just say, okay, well, I will email you the list by the end of the day today, and whatever we can get would be fabulous. Also, be very nice. As we mentioned, you gave a shout out to Connie. Be very nice and generous to those people that have a hand in your budgeting process and your purchasing process. You always want to be on their good side. And if you find a chance to help them, it will go so far, because we have our bookkeeper, and God bless her, she's trying to learn the Google world that we have in our school district, and it's just taking her a little longer, and there's some things that she doesn't know how to do, like how to add hyperlinks and emails and that type of thing. So I will sit down with her for 5 or 10 minutes and give her a quick tutorial on that, and I will tell you that goes miles, because if I need spine labels from Demco and I need them like today, I can do the requisition and give it to her, and she will process it. That will be her priority, because you know what? I helped her and I made her life easier, so she's going to do me that favor. So just keep that in mind. Also, chocolate goes a long way, or even just a handwritten note that says, thank you so much for helping me this year with my budget, helping me understand this, especially if you're a new librarian. Handwritten notes to those people that have really helped you really does leave a really lasting impression on them. And then also just know that budgeting can be very daunting. It can be very overwhelming. You might come to the fact that you really just don't like it at all. But just know that it does get easier every single year. You will get more confident. You will get more familiar with the process. You will get more savvy with, moving money or asking for money or finding money in other places. And just know that comes with time. That is not something that you're just going to walk in and be able to do. And then, and you'll figure out what format works best for you, what style works best for you, what record keeping works best for you, because you are the main person in charge of that budget and that funding. And then I'll just end with, be patient, ask questions, and above all, be organized. And I think we've got that last thing covered because,
Hashtag librarians.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Angela, you are a dream. Again, if you could have just walked me through this in my first library, I know that there are a lot of brand new librarians right now going, oh my gosh, I needed to hear this in the worst way. And I'm so grateful that you're here today. Please let listeners know how we can follow you on social media.
Sure. So Twitter is my main social media platform for anything library related. So you can find me at Angela Wojtecki. So it's at Angela, and my last name is Wojtecki. It's also in the show notes. But yeah, follow me on Twitter. And I love your Twitter, by the way, Amy. I love everything you post. I love it. And then Instagram, I'm also on Instagram, but I post more like, personal family pictures of my daughter, Skylar. So, and she's a cute 2.5-year-old. So you can follow me there at Angela W411. So that's a little bit easier. So you can follow me on Instagram that way. And then please check out the show notes. And if you have any suggestions or anything else that you want to add to the show notes or to budgeting, I am going to be more than happy. Message me on Twitter and I can throw it up in that Google Doc and share it out with everyone else, because I know there's a lot of different ideas and a lot of different tips and tricks and that type of thing. And this can really be kind of a community feedback type of thing.
Well, and Angela, I'm going to see you in October. Friends, I'm going to be going down to Ohio's school library, your state organization's conference for a Friday. And I can't wait because it's going to be the best time. I'm coming down on Thursday night. So if you want to, we can, if you're there on Thursday.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So cool. Hey, Angela, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'll see you in October.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks so much, Amy. Take care.
Friends, I have long since got over the idea that I have glaring gaps in my skills as a school librarian. And I'm so grateful that Angela knew that she was dealing with a budgeting novice in this conversation. And I so appreciate anytime people treat me with a certain amount of respect and don't make me feel silly for not understanding some of the basics of what we do every day when it comes to budgeting. So thank you so much, Angela, because it really was a very incredibly helpful episode for me to record. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider sending Angela a little fan mail, because I really needed to record this episode. One last friendly reminder, I encourage you to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more by using the code UNITED. The topic of our next episode will be #Library Twitter and my conversation with Shannon Steinmal. I hope you will tune in.